My name is Lauren, and I'm 36 years old. I work from home. My husband, Daniel, and I got married 3 years ago when we were both 33. We wanted to have children, so we visited a doctor about fertility treatments. Thankfully, the tests showed there were no problems, but even after waiting, we still hadn't been able to get pregnant. Just as we were about to give up, Daniel said we needed to have a child because his mom and sister wanted a grandchild. I sighed at his confused words. Daniel is a good husband, but he can be a bit of a mama's boy and always agrees with his mother. I don't really like my mother-in-law. Daniel is the oldest child, and he has a younger sister. His mom favors him a lot, which made his sister leave home early. Daniel's job requires him to move around a lot, but when we got married, he was working close to his parents' house. He did warn me that he might be transferred, but I thought I could live anywhere as long as we were together. However, once we rented a house near his parents, his mother often visited, especially on Daniel's days off. Even when I was working from home, she would drop by unannounced, criticizing how I did things like laundry and cleaning, which was very frustrating. Every time we saw her, she would ask about having a grandchild, and she only wanted a boy, never a girl. Her visits stressed me out. I tried to talk to Daniel about it and asked him to speak to his mother, but he always said, "My mom just wants to get along with you, Lauren," which felt too optimistic and didn't help at all. I was initially attracted to Daniel's cheerful nature, which balanced my more serious side, but we struggled to solve this issue. 6 months ago, Daniel's job transfer was finalized, and we moved away from his parents' house. Our new place is further from my parents, but it's in a nice area with good public transport, not far from them. After we moved, my stress decreased significantly. I could focus on my work, and life became more comfortable. Then, just the other day, I found out I'm pregnant. Daniel and I hugged each other in joy, even though I have some worries because of my age. This is the pregnancy we've been hoping for. When we told Daniel's parents that I was pregnant, my mother-in-law's first question was, "It's a boy, right?" Even when Daniel said we didn't know the gender yet, she insisted it had to be a boy. However, the baby turned out to be a girl. When my mother-in-law found out, she called me when Daniel wasn't home and said, "You're really useless. What did you marry into this family for?" I broke down crying, and when Daniel came home and saw me upset, he got angry. He yelled, "Are you saying my mom is wrong?" This only made me cry even more. Despite all this, Daniel does care for me and helps with chores, so he is a good husband at least when his mother isn't around. I was able to safely deliver our baby and returned home a month after giving birth. Daniel came to pick me up, and we drove back home together. To my surprise, my mother-in-law was there when we arrived. I didn't expect her to visit, but Daniel cheerfully said, "My mom came to help." While Daniel was in another room soothing our daughter, my mother-in-law took out a box of cake from the fridge. "This is to celebrate your childbirth. I'm sure you didn't get to enjoy any good food while you were out in the countryside," she said. I was annoyed by her comment but tried to ignore it. She then said the cake cost $500. I was shocked. I had never heard of such an expensive cake before. Curious, I opened the box to see what a $500 cake looked like, but I was disturbed by the smug look on her face. When I opened the box, I was disappointed. The cake didn't look like it was worth $500. The whipped cream was dry, and the fruits on top were obviously canned oranges. I wondered which bakery would sell such a bad cake for that price. I love sweets and usually enjoy any cake, but this was the first time I felt so let down just by looking at a cake. Then, as I stared at the cake, my mother-in-law smiled and asked, "So, how's the $500 cake?" At that moment, I lost my temper and threw the entire cake box into the trash. "Leave!" I shouted, surprised by my own outburst. My husband rushed into the living room. Before I could say anything, my mother-in-law started crying and said to him, "Lauren is being so mean." She pointed at the trash can. My husband looked at it and got furious. "What the hell have you done? That was a cake my mom made for you." I missed a chance to explain about the supposed $500 cake because my mother-in-law quickly added, Yes, that's right. I made that cake for you, so it's worth $500. I thought, of course, there's no way that cake could be worth $500, not even $50, or even $5 would I pay for it. It finally made sense, and no bakery would sell such a terrible cake. As I processed everything, my husband yelled, "Lauren, apologize to my mom." It seemed like he was always on our side. I stood there in shock when I heard our daughter crying in the other room. I rushed to her. There was some commotion outside the door, but right now, my daughter was my priority. Once I settled her down and returned to the living room, I found a note saying they had gone out to eat and that I should reflect on my actions. I was stunned. I wondered if I could go back to live with my parents, but I wasn't sure if it was right to run to them crying. I felt lost with nowhere else to go. As I thought about this, I glanced at the trash can where I had thrown the cake. It was still there, untouched. Unknowing, I decided to take a picture of it. Then, I called my parents and told them the whole story. My father said he would come to pick me up right away. I felt bad for my newborn daughter since we had to move again, but it was better for both of us than staying here. My husband, who said he would be out to eat, didn't come home as quickly as I expected. My father arrived first, and as he was loading our things into his car, my husband and mother-in-law finally came back. They looked surprised to see my father and got angry when they saw him carrying my stuff. "Where are you going? Relying on your parents again? Ah, you just run to them the moment something goes wrong," he yelled. His words were harsher than usual, and it looked like he had been drinking. His face was red, and he smelled of alcohol. Seeing him like this made me lose my temper. "You went drinking after leaving your wife and newborn daughter at home. Right now, I don't want to be in the same space as you two, so I'm going to my parents." Then my mother-in-law, who also smelled like alcohol, "Ted, good riddance. A daughter-in-law like you is scary." Her comments always annoyed me. "Fine, I'll take my daughter and go, so you two can enjoy your time alone," I said. My husband looked confused, but I ignored him and got into my father's car. My father seemed to be trying to keep his emotions in check and didn't intervene. The next day, my husband contacted me. "Where are you?" I was surprised when I woke up and found you gone. I remembered that he doesn't usually drink, but when he does, he tends to forget things. I sighed and replied, "Don't you remember? You left your hungry wife and daughter at home to go out to eat with your mother, and then you came back drunk after all that. I couldn't stay there anymore." While my husband sounded surprised and flustered, I could hear my mother-in-law in the background. Anger surged back in me. "So your mother stayed over. I won't go back to a home where such a rude person is staying." His voice lowered as he replied, "What do you mean? She may be your mother, but she's a stranger to me. I'm exhausted from childbirth and don't have the energy to be considerate of her. Who do you think caused our infertility? It was your mother stressing me out. Otherwise, I wouldn't have gotten pregnant so soon after we moved." When she stopped visiting, I felt relieved. I knew I was saying hurtful things, but I couldn't help it. Then my husband shouted over the phone, "You're the worst. Come back right now and apologize to my mom." When he said that, it felt like time stopped. I couldn't believe it. I replied coldly, "The reason I'm here with our child is because of your mother's request." "What do you mean?" he stammered. "Your mother didn't want her. She's always said she wanted us to have a son." I didn't know how serious she was, but I was sure when I saw that cake. "Didn't you see the chocolate plate?" I asked. "Did you not even look at the cake?" The trash can where I threw the cake yesterday was still empty, so it was probably just as I left it. I told my husband to check the kitchen trash can. "There's nothing in here. Did she get rid of the evidence in the middle of the night?" "Then why don't you ask your mother what was written on the chocolate plate and where she threw it away?" I heard his mother denying any knowledge of the plate and stubbornly refusing to say where she discarded it. I could tell my husband was hesitant, sounding weak. "Wouldn't it be awful if Daniel saw that plate? You got rid of it before he saw it, right?" In the background, I heard my mother-in-law's voice. "Why don't you hurry up and come home? Tell her to entertain me. She's a really useless daughter-in-law." At her words, my husband finally seemed to try to rein her in. I'm going to hang up and send a text. Maybe you and your mother should read it together. Contact me again when you're ready to talk. After saying that, I ended the call and sent my husband all the photos of the cake. Within 30 minutes, my husband called back, saying he would head over right away. I stopped him and said, my father-in-law should be getting here soon. Stay there. I hung up. In reality, my father had been so angry about my husband's behavior yesterday that he contacted my in-laws and reported everything to my father-in-law. Unaware of this, my father-in-law had apologized profusely and said he would talk to my husband. That evening, my husband and in-laws arrived at my parents' house. As soon as he arrived, my husband bowed deeply to me in apology. I don't know what's been happening or what my mother said to you. Looking at my senilely repentant husband, I felt cold. Don't you think it's too late to say you didn't know? Didn't we have this conversation in our previous home? You always sided with your mother, saying she just wanted to get close to me, and you did nothing to change her attitude toward me. My husband's face started to turn pale. Plus, you always said that your mom absolutely wanted us to have a son. Are you always going to do whatever she says? You chose your mom over your wife. I guess you don't need me, do you? My husband's face turned pale as he held on to me. That's not it. I'm really sorry. I didn't mean to. Then what did you mean? I shot back. My husband looked lost for words and fell silent, staring down at the ground. Daniel, you chose your mom over your own wife and daughter. It's clear you're a mama's boy. I should have seen this coming. No wonder your sister left home early. I'm not a mama's boy. I care about you too, he replied, a bit defensively. Then could you really cut ties with your mother? I asked. He went quiet again. Just then, my mother-in-law, whom my father-in-law had brought with him, yelled, how can you say that? Daniel and I are mother and son. We can never break our bond. My father-in-law tried to calm her down, but she wouldn't stop. Honestly, I never liked you. I wanted a younger wife for Daniel. In that case, I'll divorce you right now. I have the papers ready. If we divorce, you and I can be strangers, I said. Hearing this, my husband looked scared. I don't want to stay connected to someone who would write those nasty things on my cake plate. I pulled out my phone and showed everyone a picture of the plate, which said, take your daughter and leave. My father-in-law, clearly not fully informed, shouted angrily at his wife, turning blue in the face. What you did to your own daughter-in-law is awful. I was shocked to learn that my mother-in-law had once served her own daughter a birthday cake that said, I don't need a daughter, which caused them to become estranged. It was clear she had a deep dislike for women and wanted to push them away to get more attention from her son. Daniel was acting just like she expected. When I handed him the divorce papers, he started making excuses. We just had a baby. We shouldn't be getting a divorce. My mom just went a little too far this time. She was jealous of you. Try to understand. Is that what you came here to say? I thought you would tell me you were cutting ties with your mother and coming back home. I'm never going back to that house, I replied firmly. Then my father-in-law, who had been quiet and pale, spoke up. Daniel, sign the divorce papers. I'm done with this family. When I get home, I'm divorcing your mother too. My mother-in-law turned around, shocked by his words. I thought about it before, but I thought it was too late for a divorce. I thought I just needed to be patient. But now that I see you doing the same thing to another woman, I've reached my limit. Sign the divorce papers and leave our house. Reluctantly, my husband signed the papers under his father's guidance. As a consolation, I received about $10,000 from my father-in-law. I initially declined, but when he assured me it would come from my mother-in-law's assets, I accepted gratefully. My ex-in-laws ended up divorcing, and my mother-in-law, who hadn't worked since their marriage, lost all the money she had because she invested it all in cryptocurrency based on someone's bad advice. I received child support from Daniel every month, and now I'm raising our daughter with my parents' help. I'm so happy to see our daughter growing up and thriving.